OK，可以看到我的 screen 吗
可以的。
？OK，好。Good morning, everyone. So now I'm going to start to share about the basic programming. Okay, so let me. So good morning. So I'm Dr. Tan from UTAR. So 这讲解的过程呢，我会用英文哈。好，Alright. So this is an overview of the workshop where we have basically have three sessions. So the first session is about the basic ICTs and also the programming concepts. So these are the contents that's which is for the part one. Okay, now we'll go into the basic ICT. These are the timelines, which is representing the evolutions of the computers. So in first place, okay, when we are starting to have the computers, it has some in 1950s, we have a big machines. And now when you see it about 2020, so we only need to have a small phones that can compute everything which is that can be done by these big machines. So these big machines probably with the size, it would be like the size of your room right now. So it's a very great achievements and also developments of computers that we have and also technologies that we have here. So in the PC itself, you will need to have the operating systems to actually handle and coordinates all the running programs. But I think the table here, all these names are familiar to use, right? Like the Androids that we have it in our mobile phones and Windows for PCs and iOS and all others. But as we can see that now the Androids, it has the market share of 40.63%. So it's actually quite high. Then the next thing, probably you've heard about the Internet of Things these days. So these are the things that's actually happening around us, where it has the ability to transfer data over a network without requiring human to human. So the most simple thing is the examples that I can give you is like TML So you just need to give some instructions saying that 请帮我开灯, then it will actually turn off the light, turn on the lights with you for you. So in this case, when we talk about Internet of Things, it's actually to communicate with the computers. So one thing is you need to have an internet. So if you don't have the internet, probably it doesn't work on here because you can see from the word is the Internet of Things. So many things that are related to us, it's that we have over now is the Internet of Things. The next things that we need to focus on is on the cybersecurities. So cybersecurities is practice of defending computer servers, mobile devices, electronic system networks, and data from malicious attack. So those kind of attacks that you can see is the one that is actually listed so here. So these are the common attacks that we have. So probably I've actually heard about I think in many years ago, so the server that has actually been attacked by some hackers, and they actually use that from the information that they actually hack, and they use that to actually cause some threats, say that, hey, you need to pay me some money so that you can get back to the data. Or something that is very common is that they put some spyware into your PCs. Then from there, they can actually try to spy what you are actually doing in your PCs. So this is actually quite dangerous. And it's the issues that we actually need to take note, especially everyone just actually goes online today, and the profiles and everything that is actually you have probably is not that safe anymore. So unless you're staying in the forest and you're not going to, go on online and all that, else you will be under the cyber threats. So now is you have hardware, you have software. So what is hardware? Hardware is like mouse and printers, and then the CPUs, monitors, all these are hardware, where it is the things that you can see and touch, and also you can feel it. But so when it comes to software, because the thing is that you need to have a kind of software to actually tell the computers how does it actually works. So what you do is you will going to make a software to say that collects the instructions, and then from that, okay, you're going to use the data that how a computer is going to work. So in this case, you're going to write what? Application, scripts, and programs. So examples of softwares that we have is divided into two. One is PC and another one is a mobile. PC, the one that we actually know is, I believe all of you know what is this science, right? Steam, there where you can actually connect and play games with your friends. And then we have a browser like Firefox and Chromes, and all these are software in the PCs. So now we are actually moving into software era where we are going to use it in the mobile phones, like the one that we have: Twitters, YouTubes, Instagrams. All these are related to the mobile phones. In order to actually build all this software, so what you need to do, you actually need to know how to program. So this program, it's somehow that you're trying to write something by giving some examples like instructions, so that these programs can actually work on how you want it to be work, right? So there are different kinds of languages: C++, Java, Pythons, but of course now, so I think everyone has heard about the Pythons. Mostly, okay, Pythons, they actually use. Why is it so famous now? Because it is actually used for data science, like data analysis. You heard about big data and all of that. So a lot of libraries that has actually been created through to be used in the Python, so that you can actually make use of it to be analyzed in the data that you have. Now, the most basic language that we're going to have is C++, where what is the difference between C++ and also Python is that in Python, you don't need to declare variables, but in C++, yes, as you need to know how to control on your PC memories. So somehow, okay, there's a difference between it. So we'll keep, okay, so I'm going to present to you some what is the basics in the C++ and also Java. So C++ and also Java, it is an object-oriented language. So this is a basic structures of a C++ and also Java program, where you can see that this is what we call as a syntax, or you can say they are speaking a different language. So that's why the instructions will be a little bit different. It is actually similar, like different peoples in different countries, they are speaking different language. So from here, we are from different places, so we are speaking different language. But of course, if you want to talk on the same language, so that's why you have to learn on how to speak on other people's language. But somehow, the language they are speaking, the meaning probably it's actually the same. Okay, it is actually the same meaning. It's just that you need to get yourself familiarized with the language that you speak. So over here, we have a C++ and then we have a Java programs. So this one is actually trying to find the maximum values. So from here, how are you going to code it to actually to actually find the max. So this one, that's you're going to create functions. So the way of actually creating in the C++ and also Java, it's more or less the same, but it's just some syntax is still different, but they are trying to find the maximum value. So next thing is that we're going to look at is in order to actually build the structures to actually do something, then you need to have an algorithms where it is a step-by-step procedures or a set of rules to follow to complete on the specific task and solving a particular problem, especially by the computers. Because when you're trying to, I mean, in normal life, you want to solve a problems, you're going to go on step by steps, right? So you can't just go and then you just do. So so it's better that you're going to have a step-by-step procedure. So when you talk about the small procedures, it always has the inputs and also the outputs. So take some value, and then you do the process, and you produce some outputs. The important criteria of an algorithm is the instruction must be clear. This is a definiteness, and it must be able, it has a stopping points, which is a finiteness. Steps are basic enough to carry out, which is the effectiveness, and it has to be a proper in speeds, which is known as a runtime, because you cannot actually have algorithms that's actually run for a longer times. So these are algorithms that we can apply in our daily lives, like how to fry an egg, that if you follow these steps, you probably can able to fry an egg. But if let's say you want to fry a good egg, a nice looking egg of something, so probably you have to be more details, like how big is your pan and how much of oil is that you need to pour, and how are you going to crack the eggs. So these ones are, just things that you can actually do when you're actually writing an algorithms, or you are trying to give instructions. For example, here, okay, this is a swap algorithms where you're actually trying to swap between the two values. Let's say we have x is 1 and y is 2. Now you're trying to change your x to be 2 and y to be 1. So how are you going to do it? These are the steps that you can actually apply. So of course, before we actually go into the algorithms, what you can think is that we have, okay, three things, x and also y. And next thing that what we do is we create a temp to actually carry the values of x. Then after that, we go into the step 2 is where we are going to assign the x to the values of y. So now your x, you have the values of 2 and y is 2, then temp is 1. Then the next one is, because temp has already stored the values of x in the last steps. So the last steps, what you can do is you can just change your y to be 1. So you can see that eventually we have actually exchanged the value. So this is how where you can actually apply an algorithms. And this example is about the swapping algorithms. So next thing is the pseudocodes. Pseudocode is an informal high-level description of operating principles of a computer programs or other algorithms. If, let's say, probably just showing some kind of language like this, probably people would not understand. But if you're writing it or describing it in words using the pseudocodes, so anyone that actually see this, probably they will understand. Right? Because if you're speaking different kind of language, let's say I ask you to write an essay and you're writing using a Japanese. So probably other people's, they cannot understand what you're writing. But if let's say you can use a common language like English, then if you write it, then probably everyone can understand it. So you are actually trying to putting this, okay, into a kind of descriptions where everyone can actually understand so what is actually happening to your algorithms. Next, we come to the variable. which are the names given to the computer memory locations, which are used to store the values in a computer program. Each of these language, so whatever that you are actually using, it will has the variable where you will need to store some values. So C++ and Java is a strongly typed programming language because every variable must be declared with a data types. So one thing when you are actually using C++ or Java, you have to understand what is the types of your variables. So the data type, what is a data type that we are talking about? Is a particular kind of data items as defined by the values that it can take. So for examples, when you're trying to record or try to store the values of ice cream, what is the price of an ice cream? It is with a decimal values, right? So let's say a price of an ice cream is 2 ringgit and 50 cents. So it is consists of what? Decimal points, 小数点. So then when we have a decimal points, so you have to store it into a data types where it can actually keep the decimal points. But if let's say number of students in a class, can it be 10.5 students? No, right? It's supposed there's no half students. We only have either 10 or 11 students, correct, right? So in this case, you have to store it in a types where it can only store round numbers. So in here, when you're actually storing your data types, you have to differentiate it properly. If it's a sentence, then you store it in the different types. And we have two types, which is a primitive data types and also non-primitive data types. So primitive data types is the one that we already built it in, and the non-primitive is a user defined where it is actually defined by the user itself. These are the types that we have. Okay, integer floating points, double floating points. These are for figures, and then for the sentence, we are actually using the characters and also the string types. Okay, so for example, this is the integer where this is the variable names, which is my num, and you can give a value to it. So these tens, it will actually store it inside the my num. But my num, you can see over here in front, it is the int where it is only meant for a round number. So both C++ and Java, the declarations methods is actually the same. Next is the floating point, where you can see here we have a decimal values. So in this decimal value, instead of storing in the int, what you can do is you actually store it in the float. So like this. Then next is that you have a double. Okay, float and also the double, basically they are similar, but it's just that this float, you can store 6 to 7 figures, and double you can store up to 14 to 16 figures. Next is we come to the Boolean. Okay, instead of storing the figures value, we are storing the Boolean value, which is true or false. Next is the character, where it is actually storing the one alphabet's value or any symbols or figures, digits is also possible. So next is the string. String is for sentence, which that you have an empty white space. Okay, next is the input and also output. So of course, when you're actually creating an application, there will be an input and also the outputs. Input is where the user is going to key in some data, right? Then you're going to produce something to see. So how you actually do it in the C++ for the output is, these are the syntax, which is you're going to use the couts and the insertion operators, like the example shown over here. And next is actually the end lines, which is actually creating a new line where In here, we didn't apply the end lines, right? So that's why it doesn't go into new lines. But in here, the hello, we have the end lines over here, and word, we have the end line. So it's going into the next line. So this is how you can actually display the output using the C++. But for Java, okay, instead of using the cout and also the insertions operations, what you do is you use print. So it's the same as you're actually printing out in the screen, where different kinds of outputs that you need to use the different kinds of functions over here. So let's say here is string, okay, inside the codes, then you can just put something like this. But if it's in different lines, then you have to use this. So these are the formats. If let's say you have different kinds of, you want to do it in different formats like this one, or you want to have put in the figures. So you just can use format to actually do it. These are the converters for the to print out different kinds of the values, different kinds of outputs, where I'm not going into it. And next is we go into the input. So input is just now, as I mentioned, you ask the users to actually key in some values, right? So instead of using the insertion operators, so just now you can see that the arrows is actually pointing to the left sides. And now it's actually pointing to the right hand side. So it's actually asking you to key in, and it's going to read the data from the keyboard. Like this one, string name. But first, of course, you need to ask the user to actually tells what is the name. What is your name? So then in this cin, you're going to ask the user to actually key in some values over here. Then this John that is actually key in, okay, it will store inside the name over here. So when it's actually storing inside the name over here, then when you see out, you get the name John. Now, when we come to Java, okay, Java will be a little bit different, where you need to use this scatter package to actually get the inputs from the user. So these are, of course, you can see that the difference is you have to declare a variable, which is called string types, and this one is the instructions or the functions that you need to use in Java instead of using the cin. So when you actually output, it will be also different from the C++. Okay, this one is actually for Java, where you're getting a different types, input types from the user. So figures and also like sentence, you need to use it differently. These are the examples of the complete programs where you have C++ or Java that getting the name and also the age from the user. So you can see that in Java, this next line is getting a sentence. And this one is getting the int, because age, mostly when people ask you, how old are you? So probably say, I'm 7 years old. You're not going to say 7.5 years old, right? So that's why you use the int integer to the functions to get the inputs. So now next we are going into the control structure. So for the control structure is for you to make a decisions, because like in our daily lives, we make a lot of decisions, right? So probably you'll be making decisions at this moment, saying that, do I want to continue to actually listen, or I will just wait until because maybe you're actually preparing yourself trying to join the qualifying test. So probably you may decide that whether you want to join the qualifying test or not. So this is a time when you're actually making a decisions. So if I say in the future you want to make some decisions and you know how, so after you learned on the programs, you can actually use this to help you to make a decisions. But of course, it actually depends on after you decide then what is the things that you can do. So it depends on the conditions. So there are different kinds of ways to actually make a decisions, which is the if, else, and also switch case in Java and also the C++. And you have to follow the flow, because you cannot just after you make your decisions, then you can just straight away jumps into a few statements. So when you're actually making decisions, you need to have the expressions. So these expressions will help you to decide whether you're going to do it or not. So if you're going to do it, then the expressions, it has to be true. But if not, then it has to be false. So it's actually to make a comparisons as well using the logical expressions. But of course, when you're actually expressing or you try to ask the computer to make the decisions, you must give some instructions that it can understand. So these are the two possible flows. One is a one-way and another is a two-way selections, where the first one is once the expressions, this is a true expression, is a yes, then you will execute this statement one. Statement one is something that you're going to do if it is a true. But if it's false, then you just continue whatever that it is. So the next one is a two-way. So two-way is you have two kinds of expressions. So one is if it is true, then you do this statement. If it is false, then you carry out with another statement. So how does it actually work? So for example, like this one, if score is greater than or equals to 90, then your grade is A. So do we continue next statement? No, because this is just only a one way. But if for two ways, if I say if you're more than 200, okay, get a 20% discount, else 10% discount, which means that you have two kind of choice that you can actually make. These are the relational operators where you can actually use it to try to check whether the expression is it true or false, where comparisons is being carried out. So let's say if the score is 100, which means that if this is a true, right, then you have Bravo is a full score. But if it's not 100, means that it's a false statement, the condition is not true anymore, then it will not give you this output. So next would be not equal to. So for the not equal to means it's not equal, because in our in when things happens, it's going to have few things, right? And you can actually make a comparison. So that's why you have equal to, not equal to, and also the next one is a less than. So not equal to, if you come back to not equal to, if the day is not a weekend, so what you need to do, you need to study, you need to go to school. Okay, you need to have an online class. But if the Sunday, then what you do is you can play games or something like that. But of course, here we only have one expressions where it is not weekend. So next one is a less than, is if less than 40, then you fail the test. But if it's more than 40, then something will happen. So that one you have to state it clearly. We have less than or equal to, greater than or greater than or equal to. So these are the expressions and examples that shown to you, where you can look into it. So if let's say we have more than one expressions, what does it mean by more than one expressions here? Score, it can be greater than 0, or it can be less than 40. Because there's a certain conditions where you need to consider on two conditions, then you can only think that this is actually a true thing. So like the example shows over here, because if there's a negative value, so definitely it's not going to consider, right? But if there's actually the value that you provide, the score must be between 0 and 40. So same like the second one is either Sunday or Saturday is a weekend. You can see here, this is the and this is the or. So what is the difference between and also the or? So let's say the and here means if to get the A minus, it must be between 75 and also 79, right? So it must be an and, because if this one here you put an or, then means either is greater than 75 or it is less than 80, then you get an A minus that, which means a score that is actually 40 marks, then it can be a A minus already, which means that it's wrong. So it has to be an and. But if let's say we look at the or here is either Sunday or Saturday, it is a weekend, correct, right? We are not saying that Sunday and Saturday is weekend, but so either Sunday or Saturday, they are actually considered as a weekend. But other than the and, also the or, we have the not. Not is something that is actually inverse. So let's say here the score, if it is less than 40, suppose that if let's say you key in 70 here, so this is a fail, right? But you put a exclamation marks here, which is a not, means that not fail, then which means that you pass the test. Okay, so these are the logical operators. So for logical operators, if you have two expressions, then you can decide whether is it a true or a false condition. So when you're actually considering on the comparisons of logical operators, then you need to check the order of precedence. So if let's say you have these kind of symbols, or we can say that operators exist, then you need to know which one that you need to consider first. For example, like here, if we look at the second examples, we have plus, okay, we have less, greater than, and then we have all this. So which one that you have to compute first? Then we are referring to this table. Because you cannot just simply, okay, I want to do all first, then I'll do all first. No, you have to follow the order. Then so if let's say here, okay, plus and plus. So where is plus? So plus is the third one if compared to the greater than or the relational operators or the logical operator. So this one, okay, by following the sequence at the end, you get true. So it is possible that if you don't follow the order, then you get false. But of course, that is going to be a wrong, right? So you have to follow and to get the correct output. So these are the selections, where it's a simple program to determine the student's grade according to marks. So let's say the marks is 80 marks. Now, if you look at the first one, so these are the few decisions that we need to make. If you're comparing to the first one, is it between 0 and 50? No, it's not. Is it between 50 and also 59? No, it is not. But is it 60 to 79? No. So we only have the last one, which is the else. That's why if you key in 80, then you get the grade to be A. So same, you can see that between C++ and so Java, they are similar to each other. But somehow when you try to, you can see that the C outs here, where you try to display the value, it is a little bit different. Then we have a nested selections. All right, for nested selections, if you can have an if outside and then you can have an if inside also. So like this one, when you're looking at this, so let's say if we key in 200 marks. So what happened over here is you will get the grade A also, but marks, do you have 200 marks? Because normally we are considering on from 0 to 100, right? So then you can use a nested selection. What happened is that from here, you can actually check whether the marks is between 0 or 100. Well, if it's not, then it is an invalid value. But if it's between 0 and 100, then you can actually continue to see that what grade it's actually going to get. So next one is a switch. So switch over here is also same. That's same as the if and else, where you also try to make a decision that to see which one that you're going to select. But somehow there's a difference between the if else and also the switch. So what is the difference? Now, if we see over here that this is the inputs we are taking on the grades, which is the F, one character, only one thing that is key in. And also if we see on the selection here, these are A, B, C, F, and also the defaults value. It's only in one selection. It's not in the range value. But if you see on if you're using the if else, it's on the range. But for switch is not in the range. It's only one selections. So indeed, when you have a selections, in this case, for example, like this, then you can use switch. But of course, you can also use the if else. It doesn't matter as well. So you can see that switch is also suitable for choices. I'm able to compute comparisons of value in range. All right, so this is a example. So like example here, you can see that if let's say you put a case where this is actually in the range, so what happened? You're not able to actually run the program. So next thing that we go into is the repetitions, where it is looping. When you're doing making a decision, so sometimes you're going to make a wrong decisions, so you can actually keep making until you're actually making the right decisions. Or let's say you have one kind of action is keep repeating. So let's say you go to the supermarkets, but of course you cannot go now. But when you're doing let's say when we can go out and buy something. So suppose that when you take 10 things in the bucket. So what you do, you go to keep calculating to get the total marks, right? So when you put it into the counter over there, you keep repeating yourself where the price is keep going into the systems, right? So this one is considered as you keep repeating for some iterations. So that's why you need the repetitions to actually continuously can do repeat some certain actions. So here is, you can see, repeat a certain sections in the program. So it's actually start from 0 until a certain number of times, because when you go to supermarkets, you put something in the bucket. There's always a number of items, right? You cannot just keep buying things, keep repeating. So you have a numbers of times so that you can actually stop the repetitions actions here. So there will be 3 types of repetitions: while loop, do while, and also the for. For example, here, if let's say we try to display the message, welcome to NTU PC workshops. If you're not doing your repetitions, what you do is you just type this whole 10 lines out over here, and it just keep repeating. It's the same, yes, it's actually repeating, but it doesn't look efficient enough. So instead of doing like this, you can use a loop. So the example here we have is a for loop, where we know that we want to repeat for 10 times. So we're going to have set it into a 10 times. So when you're actually reaching into the tens, it will stop. And this is a example 2, where you try to calculate the total of the 5 numbers that key in by the user. But this is actually keep repeating it for 5 times, which C out and C in, that you type it for 5 times. But instead of doing this, what you can do is you can try to use a loop. Over here, we are actually using a for loop to repeat for 5 times, because you are just asking the user to key in for 5 times, right? So you can just use the for loop and repeat it for 5 times. And when you're actually doing it for 5 times, what you can do is you can also calculate the total at the same time. So these are the types of the repetition. So the first types that we are going to look in is the while loop. So for the while loop is a reserved words, where the conditions over here, it's the expressions you're going to put in and making decisions to decide whether is it true or false. If the conditions is true, then you will execute the statement. Well, when it's not, you can see the flow here is you just continue whatever that it is after the while loop. All right, so example here. So example here of the while loop. So let's say if you look at the Java, here is actually print out. So print the numbers from 1 to 10. So these are basically the outputs that we're going to have, where you can see that's while. While means is while this is actually happening, while this is actually true. While, for example here, while your I is less than or equals to 10. Initially, our I is actually 1. So ones means that this is while, this is actually, so like this one. Okay, 1 is actually less than or equals to 10, right? So this is actually considered as a true statement. So when it's actually a true statement, then it will come in, okay, to the body of the loop, and it will execute these 2 lines. So these 2 lines is, one is print out, which is print out number 1. Then it go to the next line. So this one, I plus plus, is like I plus with 1. So initially our I is 1, right? So 1 will plus with 1, then what you get 2. Then this is a while loop, so which means that it will repeat for until this one is a false. So it will go up, okay, repeat this. Next is not 1 compared with 10 anymore. It will become 2 because you have actually update. You continuously update the values of I. So instead of 1, then it become 2 already. So 2 is still less than 10, right? So this is still true. So what happened? Come in again and execute these 2 lines again. So this one, it will update to 3, 4, 5, 6. Continue until your I become what? Become 11. So when it actually become 11, then it's false already, then it will not execute the iterations anymore. So these are the things that you can think about for the while loop. And so next thing is the do while. Do while is actually similar to the while loop, but it's just that it will execute the statement for at least 1 time. Like the while loops that we have, when it comes in, you're going to check this one whether it's a true or false, right? But for do while, what happened? It just doesn't check first. What it does is it come in, okay, I just see out and then I increase, then only I check the condition. So these are the difference between the do while and also do while. So in this case, your outputs sometimes is going to be different. So for while loop, probably it doesn't even execute for 1 time. But for do while, it will execute at least for 1 time. Next, if we go to the for looping. So for the for looping is, there are 3 things that you need to take care on is initializations, conditions, and also the update. For example, here that we have is initialize that your I is equals to 1 and this I is less than 10, and you have to update your counter. So let's say here, this is step 1. Okay, you're going to initialize it. Then you need to check. So this is step 2 to make sure that it's actually fulfilled the conditions where this one is need to be true. Then step 3 is you execute the body of the loops. Then step 4, you update. Then the next thing is what you do. You repeat the steps, but it's not from 1, but it's repeat from 2. So you carry out 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, repeat until the conditions here give you the false statements. Then only you will stop the whole thing. So this is how the for loop it works. So now all these 3, okay, they are the repetitions where you can actually control using counter, sentinel, and also the flag control. So for counter control is examples that's already shown to you where I, okay, less than or equals to 10, then you control with the I over here, where you know how many times that you want to loop. Because definitely in here, we know that we will need to loop for 10 times. So that's why we set the condition here is as long as it's less than 10, then we will execute it. But for Sentinel is you don't know when or how you're going to stop it until somebody key in some values to make the conditions to be false. So for example here, let's say, okay, we have enter a positive number. So to stop, enter a negative 999. And you can see the condition here. To make it false, it has to be equals to, so it has to be, so your value that you key in, it has to be 999. So when you're reaching, when somebody key in negative 999, then this one is actually a false conditions already. So when this one is actually a false conditions, so it will not loop the body of the while loop. So this actually depends on how what is the values that you want to key in, whether you want to stop it or not. All right, so these are the examples. So let's say you key in, then you key in this, then you stop the loops. Next is the flag. Flag control is using true or false. So just now you key in values, right? You have some values, but this one, you are not going to use the value, but you use the true and false. Example here, you can see here, this is a positive where it is a Boolean value. The values that you give is a true or false. So as long as here it indicates that as a true, then this while loop is it will keep looping. But because if let's say when it comes to where the numbers that you key in is a negative value, then you set the Boolean value to be false. Then when it repeating back, so here, then your while, it will be a false value. All right, so this is an example for the Java. And these are the examples where it's going to execute. So we have a break and also the continue, where break, okay, is like we see in the examples here where if when it actually equals to 5, then you straight away break, means that you exit from the loop. So for the rest, it will not continue to execute it. But if it's a continue, so what happened? Continue is, you can see that we don't have a 5, right? But we have 6, 7, 8, and 9. So what happened if you only stop the 5th, the current loop? But for the rest, we still continue because it's a continue instead of a break. Break means that totally out, okay? You're not going to stay in the for loop. But for continue is, you still stay in the for loop, but it's just that you break for the current iterations. And then you can apply, okay, the nested control structures. So it's actually possible if let's say you have columns and also rows, then you can actually use nested control structure. So choosing the right looping is, if you know, okay, what is the number of repetitions, then you can use the for loop. But if you don't know and cannot determine in advance the number of repetitions, where it could be a 0, then use a while loop. And if you don't know, but you cannot determine, but you know that it has to at least execute for 1 time, then you use the do while loop. So these are the looping. Next, we go into the array. So array, what is the purpose of array? Is collections of related data items that you will actually keep you have a set of data. So let's say the information that we have over here. Students, okay, we have 5 students in the class. What we are trying to do is we're trying to record down the heights of the student. So for probably the first student, the height is 178. Second is 180. Then until the last one is 174. So instead of keeping them separately, we put them in a group. Why we want to put them in a group? Because it is actually trying to store the height of the whole class, right? So we just put it in the group because it's the same type of data that we want. So what happened is you can declare something like this. So this one, imagine that it's going to be something that's it's in the block over here. So this is student 1, student 2, student 3, and student 4, and student 5. So each of these value you're actually keeping in the columns, but you have to access, right? Because let's say I ask you, what is the height of a third student? Of course, if using your eyes, you can see that it is 152, right? But how are you going to retrieve it from computers? So of course, you have to tell me where does it store it in which column, right? Then you use the index value. So these index values will tells you where is the third students and in which positions of the array. In the third students here, this is actually 2, right? Why? Because you have to store it in 0 instead of 1. Because if store it in 1, so of course here is 3, right? But you have to store it in 0. So we start to count from 0, 1, 2. So when the third index is 2, then you know that this is the third student. So of course, same for the last one. Okay, although this one is a fifth student, right? Supposed here to be 5, but the index that is stored is always n minus with 1 because it is start from 0. So these are things that you take notes on the array where it always starts with 0. Example here, so more or less is very similar that you try to calculate the average of this 5 values that we have here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you add it up and you calculate the average. But if we are using array to actually store it, so we have 5, and the type all is in double. So the one that you store in the array, all type must be the same data types. And you use the for loop to actually go from one to another. It's like jumping, which is you go from after you have this one, then you go from here to here to here to here. So it is actually in the iterations patterns. Okay, so these are the ways that how you declare your array where. So let's say without initialization, so this is the initializations, or you can with initialization, so you don't need to put how many size. But if this one, okay, you have tens and you can initialize everything into a 0. So this one, you can actually have a partial declarations. So to access the elements, as already said that we need to use the index value to actually access to the elements in the array. And we also use the loop. So normally we use the for loops to actually go from one columns to another columns. So this one is the examples of how you access it. So let's say here, so we have actually how many columns? 5 columns, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this is that we have 23 and 56. So 2, 8, and 17. So forgive me because I draw it not very nice. Okay, so these are the index that we have. Okay, so when I is actually 0 and is actually less than 5, so it's actually referring to the num 0, correct? Num and then 0 here. So which one is the num 0? Is this one. So what happened? You see out it as 23 because 23 is actually storing in the first column. So now once you go back up. So now your I will become 1. So what happened? it's actually changing the value inside the brackets. So num1 is which one? Is referring to this one, which is 56 over here. So when you see out, you get as 56 over here. Same as you go to the 2. So over here, we are jumping by following the sequence from one column into another column, which we control the index in between the brackets over here. So when you're actually trying to retrieve elements inside the array, so it's actually important that you know how to control the index value inside the brackets. Right, so these are the array where you can actually access it. So of course, you actually don't confuse with the, so this one and this one is actually different. Where test I plus plus means that you are increase the value of the value that is stored in the test I. But here, I plus plus is you are actually increasing the index value. So they are actually different if you want to use this operators. So next is the assignment of the array, where if let's say you have two array, which is a new test and also test, so you cannot just put the equal signs. Instead of doing that, you have to use a for loop and copying or assign it element by element, as the example shows over here. So next thing we go into is the two-dimensional array. Two-dimensional array, normally we are actually looking at as a table. So I believe all of you know what is table, right? So let's say here we have a table. So for example, here we have 4 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, forgive my drawings. So we have 3 columns. So this is what we know as columns. And this one, okay, we know as a row. So in here, this row, okay, you have still the same that we have index. So let's say the first row, we have this 1. And then here we have 2, okay, there we have 3. So this is also the same, that 0 and 1, okay, and then this one we have 2. So let's say when you are talking about the third row and the second column is 1, 2, 3, third row, and second column is this one. So in this case, what we represent it as 2, 2, okay, and then 1. So the index to actually go to the third row and second column is this. Okay, let me draw it out a little bit better. So it would be something like this. So of course, the name, all right, it must be the name as that you have actually declared. So something that's shown over here, right? So this is how you access to the two-dimensional array. So example like this one, it is a third row, 1, 2, 3, third row, and third columns where the index is 2 and 2. So if let's say you try to assign the values of 86 into the third row and third column, so 86 will be in here. And this one, okay, this one is that you try to initialize the two-dimensional array, which is, this is a two-dimensional, it looks like a table, where this one, okay, is the first row. So how you declare it when you're trying to initialize it, so it's something like this. First, you have a big brackets, curly bracket outside to show that this is a whole array. And if you're trying to define the first row, then you have to have a curly brackets. So this is showing as the first row. So this is a first column and second column. So that's why you can see that 84 and 78 is over here. Right, so this one is how you can actually initialize your array. And this one, of course, it has more, which is a 5 rows and 5 columns. So this is how you can actually do it. So 5 rows and 5 columns, where if you try to sum the arrays of elements, in here. So what you can do is it's going to be something looking like this. So let me draw again. Okay, so sorry. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So for this one, it's actually trying to sum up all the values inside this table. So what happened is it goes with rows and columns by columns. So this is the first row. So it calculates, it go into the first row first, then it will go into the columns. So it will add up all these columns. And then after that, it will go into the next row. Okay, and then columns by columns again. So add up all. So which means that you go one by one. But how you go one by one is you go column by column, then row by row. So how you actually do it, you use for loop. Okay, because you can't just simply just say that, hey, add up all. No, you have to go one by one by using for loop. All right, so this is another example that you try to sum row by row. So just now this one is all, the whole thing, but this one is you go row by row. So how you do it is you can just also same thing that you have a nested for loop where this one you are actually controlling the column, but it is referring to a one row. Then you get the average value. Then you repeat into the second row. Okay, so this one is a column by column. So of course, it depends on you whether you want to be columns or rows, as long as you know how to control the index inside the array. So this one, you can go up more than 2 dimensions. You have 3 or 4 dimensions is also possible. Okay, that's a reference and thank you. So if let's say you want to learn on how this actually computes, so you can actually go to the Python tutor. So for the Python tutor, what happened is, so it's going to look something like this. So let's say we have an example here that you can actually put your codes inside. So this is the example codes of C++. It has a Python, Java, different types, and it will give you the illustrations of how the code is actually happening at the back end. So let's say here we have an array which is num and size of 5. So suppose that it will look something like this, where you have a stack and also the heap memories. In the main, because when we are actually doing computing, we have a main functions as the starting points where your program would be. Then it has 2 variables, which is num. So this num over here is an array where it just has 5 columns. It's going to store 5 values. And the type is an integer type where it only stores round numbers. So in here we have 0, the first column is 23, and 56, then until the last one, it is a 17. Right, then total is 0. So now what we are trying to do is we try to see out what is the value inside the array. So here we are using the for loop. So for I is equals to 0, then I is less than 5, then I plus plus. So when I is 0, it will see out the 23, correct, right? So then it will calculate the total as well. So for the total, initially is 0, so we will plus with 23. Then this one, okay, it goes into the 5 iterations, so it's going to keep, doing it. There you can see that it keep changing, and then the lines, it keep going into a different lines over here. So this one will actually helps you to understand more. So then after that, of course, when you are out from the for loops, what happened? You have get the total value, which is 106 over here, right? So then that's the end of the loop. So you can actually copy and paste different kinds of the code inside of here to see what is actually happening at the back. So this is the end of the explanations. And now I'm going to show you the examples. So if let's say you have actually familiarized or you have actually learned the basics programming. So what you can actually do with it? You can actually do a lot of things, but the one that we have, the examples that I'm going to show here is a very simple programs, simple applications that you can actually create yourself. So for example, like this one, it is a game management systems where you can actually allow a user to buy games and also for the admins to add games. So let me show you. We have two roles. One is a user or one is the admin. So let's say I'm a user. Okay, I started out with the user first. Then I have to log in because normally in the systems, when you're trying to use an application, you need to have a login, right? You cannot just simply let other people to use your account. So let's say I log in. Then I try to create my, key in my own username and also password. So let's say I don't have, it tells me that I don't have an account, so it is an invalid input. This is normally what will happen, right? Let's say you try to log in into Facebook. It will tell you if let's say you key in the wrong password. So you have to tell the user that it is a wrong password. So now if let's say I create my own account, so I just give my username and then I key in my password. So these are the normal things that you can actually, normal things that you see when you try to key in into some applications or some available websites. So when I successfully create my accounts and are able to key in the correct username and also the key in correct password, then I come into the interface. So this is where I can actually buy games, delete my games and view games, and I can see the wallets, how many that I have in the wallets, and I mean, this is all the things that I have that the user can do. So let's say I view games. All right, so let's say here, so I haven't buy any games yet. So let's say I go to buy the game. There are 3 games. Okay, that two. Price is 10, and these are the descriptions that I have. But the problem is I say, okay, the money that I have is 0. So what? So if I say I try to buy something, so I confirm, then it says that, oh, I don't have sufficient money. So what I do, of course, I need to go and do some top up. So I go to my wallet and I check, okay, my balance is 0. So what I do some top up is, let's say I buy some money. So it says my top up succeeded. Then you can see my balance, I have 200. So I top up again. Okay, I successful. So now I go back and I buy games. So here I have 3 games here. So let's say I buy Tonton, which is 2. Yes. So okay, 50 has been deducted from my wallet. All right. So now is I buy again. I buy a few times. Okay. Can I buy the same game? Well, yes. I mean, this program say yes, I can buy this game. So of course, this is something wrong. This is just an example to show you that in the normal applications, of course, you're not allowed to buy the same games, right? So these are the things that you have to take care of when you are creating your own applications. So I already buy enough games. So I go out from the menu. So I can view what games that I already buy. So these are 3 games that I have actually buy. So now if let's say, okay, let's say we try on the cashback module. So these are the cashback module where I want to claim or change my points to the cash. I have gum. Okay, correct perfectly. I have a 3. So now I try to get the cash back. So I select 1 as my selections. So there you can see here, okay, I get back my cash back successfully. Okay, so then I come back over here. Then you can see my points here has returned to 0. So now if I go back to the modules. So if let's say I log out, bye. So what happened? If I go into the admin, okay, because admin, you have to have an admin where you can actually update the game details or add in the new game. So let's say if I add in the new games, the game names, so let's say PUBG, so fight in a team, and so let's say just fight the team, right? Then the price is 200. Okay, so this is the one that I'm going to add in. All right, so if let's say if you look at the statement here, so these are just now I buy 3 games, right? So it has the records over here and the total price is 130. All right, so now if I back to the menu. So just now as an admin, I already add the game, right? So if let's say we go back to the user. So same thing also. Okay, I log in. Okay, now I want to buy a game. So you can see just now I add in the PUBG, right? And the price is 200. So it's actually appearing over here. But before that, before the admin add in a new game, so you only have 3 games. So now if I buy a game here, yes. Okay, so these are the things, samples that I show you where we have this one example program. So now let's say we try another program. So another program, it will look something like this, where it's a kind of an interface, which is actually similar to the DOS operating systems, where I think it is about 20 or 30 years ago, before even even you are born. Okay, so you can do something like this with a very simple program that you have learned just now. So let's say here, same thing. If let's say you try to sign in, okay, but of course I don't have an account, so I will create an account first. I mean, same account, so password 1 2 3 4 5 6, my name. Okay, like this one, mobile number. How many numbers that I can have? Okay, the IC number. So I was born in 2010 08, so 1 2 3 4. So it appears that we have actually created a new account and I need to top up. So I want to top up, yes. So if let's say I pay about top up 200, then I get my balance inside. So these are my details that I have. And you can show here that it was, if it's a very intelligent applications or systems when you create, it can calculate automatically for yourself. So let's say the age here, once I key in here. So what is my age? I'm only 1 year old. Then for gender, it's actually generated from your IC number. I hope you all know that, okay, the last number of your IC, it shows that what gender you are. So if it's an odd, then it's a male. If it's a female, then it's a even number. So from here, you can generate, okay, what is your gender? Then if I say you're confirmed, then you press enter. So now I'm gonna sign in. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6. All right, so then I'm start to book and a room, because it's a karaoke booking system. So when you book the karaoke, then what you do, you call and say, I want to book what time and when I'm going to go. So something like that. But here you create a system. So let's say I want to book room number 5 and year that I want to book. So 2021, month is October. So let's say, and the day that I want to book is 10. So these are the things. So it shows me that what time that I want to book. So let's say I want to book at 5 o'clock and I want to sing for 2 hours. So from here, it says that starts from 5 and end at 7. So I want to continue. So if when you book, you have to pay, right? So you start to pay. Okay, then it shows me here, I book by me and room 5, and these are all the details. So it shows me that I have the price is 20 ringgit for 2 hours. Also, it's very cheap. So then I press enter to pay. So it says that pay here that I can book again. So now let's say if I want to do some searching because I want to see what is the rooms that I have actually booked. So it will shows me over here. All right, so if let's say I want to return to search, okay, I want to go back to the main menu. And then if let's say I want to go to the profile, can I view my own booking? Yes, you can actually view your own booking. So if let's say you want to search, so we are actually coming back to the same. But if I say I just want to view my profile, so these are my profiles that I have. And I also can change my profile, right? So these are the things that you can do, which is a simple program if after you have learned all the basics program. So I think that's all for today. Okay, I show you the examples and also the basics and everything. So I guess that is all for these sessions. So I think that's all for now. So I'll give back 我把这个现场交回给那个给文斌。文斌文斌老师你在那边吗？一下啊。So I think that's all for today. So I guess still not.
Hello.
OK， 我
不好意思，我刚刚走开了一下下。
没事。OK， 好，谢谢你。
谢谢Professor， 我们同学们今天应该有收获啦，尤其是我估计今天线上还有一些第一次来参与我们这个活动的同学啊，所以应该看到很多同学有打888哦，好666的哦，888也好，666也好，请同学们掌声不断好不好？我们给我们的这个 Professor Dan 888 666作为一个结束好不好？谢谢 Professor 给我们的这个分享哈，尤其是这一段时间，我想很多同学好像你们电脑课也有上，我不是很确定啊，就是整个电脑的历史啦然后 programming 的结构啦，今天应该也学到一些工具作为一个检查你的 coding 有没有正确啦这些部分希望同学可以善用它，尤其是在比赛之前可以多多的练习善用今天 Professor 提供给大家的，我们的这个 Dr. Dan 提供给大家的这些工具，好不好？再一次谢谢我们的 Dr. Dan 下来我们也进入了，但同学如果你们有想要上厕所什么的请自便我不知道多少同学是挂机的因为我知道我们家小朋友上课有时候也是会挂机不过如果你认真在听课现在想上一下厕所什么的，你们可以自行处理好不好那接下来我们就进入了我们下一个环节我看到